Namaskaram, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion session by Ajna Lens. Our topic for today is innovating realities, the crucial role of XR SDKs in transformative experiences. So, first of all, I would like to introduce everyone to our panelists. First is Mr. Viswajit Singhania. He has completed his Bachelor's of Technology from Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University. He started his career with Daily Junkies and he was a co-founder of it. He has also worked as an XR developer and senior Unity engineer. He is also a certified blockchain developer. Welcome, Vishwajit ji.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Mayur.
Yeah. Uh, the next panelist is Mr. Utkarsh Shukla. He has completed his bachelor's in technology from IIT Kanpur. He started working as a technology consultant and then CTO at India Art Village. He has been a founder and co-founder at companies like Five Startups, BTPL Tech, Barefoot Lining, Arrow AI, and currently working as a founder and CEO at Yug Metaverse. Welcome, Utkarsh ji.
Hi, Mayor. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Our next panelist is Mr. Neerav Shah. He has completed his Bachelor's of Computer Application from Yashwantrao Chavan University. He has completed his MBA from NMIMS, started his career as a project manager at Facet Leon Solutions. Currently, he's working with Ajna Lens as a project manager. He's passionate about driving business growth and leveraging technology for success. Welcome, Neerav ji.
Thanks for having me here.
Yes. So let's start our discussion with what SDKs are. Can like I would like to ask first Utkarsh ji, like what could you please tell our audience like what is SDKs all about?
So typically, when you essentially are interacting with the hardware, so the way basically you instead of directly interacting with the hardware at a lower level, typically manufacturers or basically independent systems basically sort of provide up a interface layer to you so that you can call up specific functionalities without you going to go very deep into the nature of hardware or the way the hardware works. So for example, basically, let's say there is an option to, for example, to register up a click. So multiple hardwares might do up the click registration in a different way, but they might expose you through a simple SDK saying that, okay, on click is something basically where you will get the click irrespective of what the hardware is. So the SDK could be for a specific hardware, or it could be a standard SDK which basically abstracts up different hardwares or different hardwares differences. So that's where the role and the key the key usage of SDK comes in.
All right. So anything Vishwajit would like to add on?
Yeah, so SDK in simple terms is basically a toolkit with some predefined functions and libraries, which basically help the developer to perform certain actions and build their program effectively. So it basically is the process. It's just like the game which we used to have in childhood, like the mechanical box, which have the toolkit with all the tires and the screws. So we just have to put all the screws in, and we have a car ready.
Great. Fantastic. So Neerav ji, would you like to add on something?
Basically, SDK can be the bridge between your hardware and your experiences. Basically, SDK connects with the hardware sensors, your hardware capabilities, and it takes you to the experiences for the better experiencing the VR experience. Basically, for
All
enhancing the better experience in VR. So if you have camera sensors on your headsets, to use that camera sensors, you have to connect your camera to your experience. So for an fresher, this could be a difficult task. For a beginner, it can be a difficult task. So software development kits are available wherein it's easy to interact and implement in your experience.
right. So, I have went through each and everyone's experience, like Utkarshi, Vishwajit ji, and Neerav ji as well. So, first of all, I would like to understand your journey. Like Utkarshi, how was how did your journey started from 2009, I believe, right? You started your journey, you started your career as well. So how was this journey like coming into XR? How did you came to know about XR industry?
See, essentially, I have been into XR and 3D basically since way much before. Basically during my college days, basically we used to have these, 3D animation and gaming and XR clubs basically. So we started up from there, and basically, in fact, I think post my college, we started with a gaming company. This was a time basically somewhere around PS3 and PS2 sort of an area. We were developing up games on Indian IPs. Basically, if you I'm not sure much people in the south, but especially people in the north would know there is this Raj Comics. Basically, they had this concept of Doga and Nagaraj and all of that stuff. So we were working with them and sort of basically developing on those IPs games for the Indian market. But again, basically that was the time basically where most of the distribution channel was typically through, physical CD sales, and a lot of that time basically the revenue monetization was sort of a tricky thing. So that's where basically from there, basically, I then basically switched up into a couple of other domains, basically. I've been into AI for pretty much decent time. And then basically, I think 2000, last, 3-4 years before, basically, I essentially went back saying, because, what we realized is that with the mobile and the advent of everything, basically, that entire distribution issue has been sorted out. So that's where we went there. And fortunately, I think basically Facebook also sort of doubled down on the concept of meta, and then the entire Web3 essentially was also happening. So I think that is, this is now at this point is a very good time to essentially be in this space. And I think again, if you look at the growth trajectory, or what happens is basically it always starts with a hype, and then basically it slows down, and then the actual real use cases come in. So that's what typically is happening up. I think basically last year, basically it was, there was a huge hype. Now basically it has actually come to its proper senses, and then basically actual use cases are sort of coming in for 3D, metaverse, XR. What I believe is at certain point, all of these things will sort of culminate into a single sort of a solution. AI and metaverse. We essentially are using a lot of AI and sort of to generate up 3D worlds automatically. So a lot of those things is something that we are doing. So yeah, basically, I think this is an exciting time to be there. And I think basically, yeah, going forward, I think metaverse, especially, I think basically the moment your hardware provider, especially for example, Apple and all, basically when they are releasing up their hardwares, I think that is sort of going to play up a decent role the moment basically people start experiencing it. So yeah, that's the entire journey from that perspective.
Obviously. Like Vishwajit, coming to Vishwajit, so you have been a XR developer, and you're currently a senior Unity developer as well, right? So how did you came to know about XR industry? Like, I have seen people completing BTech and moving to becoming a developer into some other domains, like not into XR. I have very much recently saw people directly shifting their domain into XR domain. So how was your journey into this?
Yeah, my journey started during the Corona times basically. So I was a, very heavy gamer since childhood. I used to play a lot of games, but I never thought that I'll be developing games someday. So during the Corona period, I was also playing PUBG like every youngster was playing. So I got bored and I was on a call with my friends. So we were discussing that we wanted to watch a movie like Bahubali or Infinity Games and just wanted to watch it in a theater-like environment. So there I, the thought of that I had played a VR game somewhere in the mall or somewhere. So then I thought about these XR and VR experiences. Then I started my research that how VR is and what VR can offer us, how we can, use VR to generate experiences. Then I started learning about Unity and how to create AR VR experiences, the whole thing about XR industry. Then I got to know about XR. Then I did a small internship with a startup also. Then I worked full time as an XR developer, and then just the journey continues till then on.
Great. That was a fantastic journey, like Vishwajit. So, Neeravji, coming to you, like, how did you started your journey?
So basically, it was similar what Vishwajit said. So I was also a big time gamer in my college times, and somewhere in 2017 or somewhere around that, there was a huge craze of PSS launched the VR with that as an added module. So at that time, it was a very new market and it was a very new technology, and being a gamer, you were being a gamer and developer both, so it was very curious, so how it is made, what is the key technology, and it drive me in a passionate way into this industry. So I started learning about how it is developed, what's the back end, what's the front end, and what's the whole thing. So after that, we came to know about the Ajna lens where I am right now. So it was into this the same industry, and hopefully, when I wanted to switch my career at that point, I dived into this. So
That's again a beautiful journey that you had in your career, and we wish everyone that you go ahead, more ahead. Coming to our topic, back to our topic, we will be discussing first about development into SDKs. So first, my question is for Utkarshi. Utkarshi, when it comes to building content for different headset, how easy it is to restructure the existing content and add other SDKs within it?
See, I think, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, there are two levels basically. There is one level basically, wherein basically there is a industry-wide sort of a optimization. So, for example, if you look into, for example, XR, you have this standard called as OpenXR. So, I mean, most of the hardware manufacturers, again, I mean, different hardware manufacturers, because they have different hardwares or different capabilities, I mean, they probably have, I mean, their own independent drivers, but basically they essentially try to adhere to at least the standard. I mean, so for example, most of the hardware devices support OpenXR. So there is one at the standard level. Again, along with OpenXR, still basically there would be some devices which would have separate capabilities. So, for example, some would have capabilities which are not integrated up into the standards, or they have created something. Uh, so one is basically at the standard level and the other is basically at the tool level. So for example, if you are using Unreal or Unity or any of the platforms, so when you're essentially using that, most of these tools also sort of provide up a sort of interoperability, wherein they essentially have already sort of integrated up most of these SDKs or some of these SDKs. So that's where basically at you, or which essentially is the experience creator, the experience creator does not has to sort of basically juggle up into the internals of most of these SDKs. But having said so, I mean, yeah, I mean, basically there are many a times basically which you have to get into. Uh, I mean, still basically using tools like Unreal Unity basically sort of negates a lot of issues. But the moment basically you go on a lower level, basically you essentially then encounter a lot of these things. So yeah, I mean, it depends upon how much basically are you sort of getting deep into the core features of this. But yeah, I think basically a lot of tools are there basically which help you to sort of streamline your experience creation journey, not sort of getting deep into the platforms or the hardware.
So, Neeraj, are SDKs more beneficial for beginners or professionals,
so
according to you?
basically, according to me, SDKs can be beneficial for both beginners and professional, but it could be in a different way. For beginners, uh, easy. So if SDKs are beginner friendly, if I'm entering into a VR industry and I'm starting to develop an experience, so if SDKs are beginner friendly, that would be beneficial for me. It would be creating an easy access and an entry point for me. If the SDKs are on an advanced level, so that would be a point wherein I think I should enter it or not. It would be a very difficult task for me to create an experience in it. So first of all, it should be for beginners. It should be in a beginner-friendly SDK, wherein the documents also it should be very simple. We should have tutorials, samples, and maximum should be managed with the editors itself. basically, and it should lower down the complexity of integrating advanced features for beginners, basically. For professionals, the SDK should be in such a way that they could get easy access to the advanced features, and they can tweak and use, customize and use in their own way. It should be it should have the capability to create an optimized experience, basically. And to ensure, so basically SDK, I'll tell you about Ajna XR SDK basic. So over here in Ajna Lens, we develop Ajna XR SDK. So Ajna XR SDKs are designed to ensure capability optimization with specific hard with our Ajna XR headsets, basically. And professionals can relate this SDK to create experience that performs well, to provide an seamless user experience for our headsets, basically. So SDK also provide pre-built functions, modules, reducing the need of reinventing the wheel. So we already have developed our SDKs in such a way. So so basically how VR works. VR takes us all together into a 3D dimension, basically. In that, we basically uh, interact with virtual objects, wherein our hand movements, our controller movements have been tracked properly. So for that, we have pre-built functions which can be reused with our SDKs.
Okay, great. So, Vishwajit, how important is it for developers to have dedicated SDKs?
Yeah, so dedicated SDKs are very much useful if you want to explore the hardware more, and if you want to give your user some more customized features. So let's take example, we have Android Studio for developing Android applications, and we have the Xcode for iOS, but we also have Flutter. So when you want to create just a basic application that works on both Android and iOS, then you can use Flutter. But if you want to give your users more customized features and good looking UI, then you go to the dedicated SDKs. That, for example, if in Android you go to the Android Studio, and for iOS you go to the Xcode. So similarly, here also dedicated SDKs are very good for giving more customization. So let's say we have the XR interaction toolkit also, and we also have the Oculus integration for developing the Meta Quest 2. But if you want to use the some good features and some latest cool features that Meta provides you, so for that you only have to use the Oculus integration. So hand tracking is also available for only if you use the Oculus integration, not the XR interaction toolkit. So yeah, SDK plays a major role depending on how the developer wants to use it and what he wants to create.
All right, great. So, this was about the development. When we speak about development, there are definitely a challenges part will be coming, right? Everywhere. So coming to the challenges, Neeravji, what do you think? Like as we see a diverse range of XR hardware nowadays, how do XR SDKs navigate the challenges posed by hardware fragmentation to ensure a consistent experience for developers and users?
So basically, the very key challenge, what I can see here, is basically if you have an existing experience, you have developed it for Ajna XR Pro, that would be only compatible with Ajna XR Pro headset. If you have developed an experience with Quest, it would be compatible with only Quest. So over here, I think each and every headset supports OpenXR, but the SDKs should be so user friendly in a way that if I want to run an existing experience on any of the headsets which are there in the market, it should be compatible with that. I shouldn't spend a lot of time creating the whole wheel again. If I because creating an VR experience take a lot of efforts, and it's a lot time taking process, basically. So it should be a standardized process, and each and every SDK also should be in a way that it should be compatible with each and every of the headset. If I take an example of a mobile device, like so I have in Android phone we have Play Stores. So applications are compatible with each and every of the phone. So if I have developed WhatsApp basically, so WhatsApp will be compatible with OnePlus, it would be compatible with Vivo, it would be compatible with Samsung. There is no customization required, basically. There's one application with that, it would be compatible for the whole the platform. So it should be standardized with the VR as well. Because over here, the challenges are the same. It takes a lot of efforts creating that.
Right, that's right. So, Utkarshi, what challenges exist in overcoming barriers to user adoption of XR technology?
See, when you're talking about XR technologies, I think basically a couple of things. I mean, both from a user perspective and from a developer perspective. From a developer perspective, obviously things need to be sort of very simple. I mean, and not just basically from the perspective of experienced developers. I mean, newbie developers or somebody who essentially just getting into should also sort of have ample sort of tutorials, some ample amount of basically things to sort of learn from a user perspective. Basically or basically somebody who essentially sort of in terms of basically how to sort of get the users to sort of adopt up the XR, not only just for basically games, but basically for a lot of purposes. I think basically there this essentially also sort of I mean, from my perspective, basically this essentially ties back to the developer adoption. So I think this is a entire cycle wherein basically you need to have developers interested from the perspective of, because there would be users to essentially use that, and from the purpose of user, basically they essentially also sort of need to have diverse amount of I mean, applications and games which are being developed, so that basically that entire I mean, this sort of basically sort of makes sense. I mean, again, XR is today in what, in the phase which typically an iPhone was when the launch of iPhone typically happened. I mean, you essentially didn't had a lot of apps and everything, but yeah, I mean, basically there is a promise that there is a technology which essentially has sort of basically a potential to get a lot of things basically running up on it. So yeah, I mean, basically in terms of the user adoption, in terms of technology development, as well as basically from the usage, I think this has to be a decent journey which essentially ties both the ends back.
Perfectly fine. So, like Vishwajit, how do XR SDKs contribute to overcoming integration challenges in creating immersive experiences across different platforms?
Yeah, so definitely XR SDKs help us a lot in creating the immersive experiences, because the hardware that is used to, experience the immersive experiences is very complex. I mean, they use like 6 or 7 sensors, different parts of the hardware use different software. So the SDK basically boils us down and, remove the complexity so that the developer can easily just use a function and use all the input handling and the controlling system, and that can be effectively the complexity effectively just removes from there, and the developer can easily just focus on the development of his or her experience. So it basically provides you with the platform abstraction, device compatibility basically, mostly because we have some uh, unified XR interaction toolkit like SDKs that basically allows you to build experiences for all the headsets that are available in the market right now. So that's what XR SDK contribute in the journey of a developer.
That's really great. So, we spoke about development, we spoke about challenges till now. Let's talk about futuristic approach. Like how, first, like Utkarsh ji, how can XR SDKs facilitate the seamless integration of virtual, augmented, and mixed realities?
See, I think if you look at virtual reality or augmented or mixed reality, I mean, basically all of them basically work on a very basic same principle, which essentially is that there is a 3D world, and then basically within that 3D world, basically your entire sort of I mean, the way basically the I mean, the way you are essentially interacting up, basically that sort of gets changed in a smaller way. But yeah, I think in a larger perspective, the world creation, the world building, and a lot of that stuff basically sort of remains the same. So I think somewhere down the line, XR SDKs, I mean, have a very critical role to play and a decent role to play, so that basically your I mean, a lot of things which are working up to together, or basically which are sort of basically the common denominator, those the user basically doesn't has to do all of that. And the interoperability is something that can be very easily achieved. For example, I mean, if you're talking about, let's say, looking at let's say a particular uh, what I mean assistant, basically, or let's say basically your particular item or a particular gun. So that gun's behavior, that gun's the for example the shooting mechanism and all of that basically typically will be sort of pretty much similar in across either a virtual reality or a mixed reality, or even from that perspective from a gaming or a 3D sort of a perspective also. But yeah, I mean, basically based upon individual domains. So if we're essentially using that within a 3D game or versus, or basically using, by 3D game what I mean basically on a mobile device or something basically, versus basically in a VR or versus on XR. So I think basically the differences and the common denominators could be handled up at the SDK level, wherein basically the user can be sort of freed up with a lot of stuff basically.
That's right. So, Neerav ji, like looking into the future, how might XR SDKs transform social interaction in virtual spaces, creating more immersive and realistic social XR experiences?
So basically, creating an XR experiences, and I can see so SDKs should be always beginner friendly, and it should be for professionals as well. It should be easy to customize for all. So basically, if I want to use an advanced feature, I should, and I'm a professional. I do not want simply drag and drop or simply using any kind of easy stuff. I really want to create an best XR experience, basically wherein a real interactions and real world skills and real world scales have been matched. Basically, if I'm playing a game, I'm playing cricket into a VR, and if I want to match a real cricket with the VR cricket, then I should be easily able to integrate with the SDKs that you have provided, and it should be so open or so friendly that if any professionals want to like get into the stuff, should deep crack the code and develop any kind of stuff, they should be easily able to do that basically. And we also are seeing AI driving the whole world right now. So it should be like if SDKs and experiences in this board, we combine that and we also implement AI in it, basically. So experiences in the future, in the near future, experiences are going to be made with the AI. I've seen a lot of LinkedIn posts wherein the people are developing such kind of technologies wherein you just write about like I want this kind of environment with this lightnings, I want a tree besides that, so it's created so quickly, and if you want to develop any kind of experiences with that, it's like seamless and it's best for use. So SDK's integration also is a challenge in the current state, because each and every actions, each and everything should be mapped accordingly. Wherever user inputs should be mapped, wherever the angle, what angle it should be, and accordingly like that. So if AI can help us integrating this board, that could be a key changer and a turning point for all of us. So the whole pain point of this market is basically creating an optimized and a quick experience. So if this can be done, then it would be a key change point for all this.
That's great. So, Vishwajit, like talking about like as Neerav talk about the AI, how do you see XR SDKs integrating with artificial intelligence to create more immersive experiences?
Yeah, definitely artificial intelligence can, enhance the experiences of integrating an SDK with with features like generative AI. Like we have this chat GPT now. So just imagine that in a SDK we have a feature like chat GPT. You just have to type a prompt to integrate a certain feature, and the feature is integrated. So that integration becomes more easy, and you can more focus more on features that you want, and you can try and experiment that. And also there's a company that has used AI for NPCs. So you can just drag and drop their NPCs into the game, and they behave like real characters. You don't have to put their dialogues in them or everything. They will just adapt to the environment of the game and the player. So yeah, AI can help very much in the process of game and SDK also. So for example, if we are making some game and we enable AI in that and use that smart AI to, increase the challenges more and more as the player progress. So our environment can adapt to the, habits of player and how he is playing, what are his weaknesses, what are his strengths. It can also be used in the analysis of the game, that at what part of game the players are having more fun, engaging more. So the AI can, help in many ways. It's like sky is the limit if AI is integrated.
I wanted to actually ask this question to to, all the panelists. Like, what do you think, according to you, where India will stand in the coming years into technologies? Because even I recently saw an interview of Jeff Bezos, the founder, CEO of Amazon, and he said that the coming time is of Indians, the coming century, or it is completely Indians are going to take over everything. So what are your views on this? Like, how you must have seen everything into the development part or the IT part as well. So what are your views? Like, we can start from Utkarshi.
See, I think, no doubt, basically, we Indians are typically one of the smartest brains within the world, basically. Most of your tech companies to most of the companies basically have Indians at the top. Specifically coming to the XR market or the gaming market, basically. I've been into market for some time. I've seen those entire turns, basically. There are two, three things basically which I think basically need to happen. One is basically, I'm leaving the services part because there's no doubt on the services part. Basically, if there is a project and there is somebody who essentially wants to get it developed, basically India is great in that. Basically there is no discussions on that. So if basically, today basically most of these Marvel movies basically are being made in India. Basically, if people do not know, basically most of the Indian studios are the ones basically who are doing those VFXs. Coming from the services industry to the actual product industry, basically making the next meta within India, or making the next sort of a 3D or VR sort of a product, which essentially sort of has a huge impact. I think that's where basically we'll have to look into a couple of things. There are a couple of challenges in those areas. One is basically, if you look at, basically from the perspective of the technology, basically, for example, today you get a lot of people basically who essentially are able to use tools or use SDKs and sort of create things. But when you essentially go deep and sort of go into the extreme depth of basically creating those tools and creating those applications, so that is where basically, especially in XR, because what has happened essentially within the gaming industry, and I think basically that's where India also was sort of behind for a long time, was because basically from a societal mindset, basically we have that mindset that okay, basically my child is good in study, so basically you should not play games. Wherein basically, if you look at the Western construct, games are not looked too negatively. So, and then basically that also translates back into that entire ecosystem, wherein basically you have a lot of issues in terms of selling up games. Basically, if you look at the Western markets, basically, people literally go and buy games. Basically, in India, basically that ratio or even that amount also basically is pretty low as compared to the Western standards. So, if you look at that entire way basically that sort of influences the industry, that essentially is something that has to be there. I think basically there are two ways in which basically we can essentially look into. One is basically create global products. You don't have to be confined to Indian constructs. Basically, you can essentially create global products, and that's where basically you essentially have an edge and a leverage, basically, because here you essentially can get people who essentially can work with you to sort of create up a product that you can sell to US or European markets. Because essentially, at the end, whatever you say, basically, you essentially have to have funds for managing all of that. And secondary is basically you have to have that sort of a grooming process set up basically, so that you consistently keep on getting up people who essentially are into that industry, because this XR and metaverse and those sort of industries are sort of a niche industry, because I mean anybody who essentially sort of is into coding, programming, usually prefers to go into, I mean, your standard software or a web development or a cloud or those sort of an industry. So because I mean basically again it sort of includes a lot of concepts from different industries. I mean as simple as core maths concepts. So yeah, I mean basically there basically you need people who essentially can go deep, dive very deep into the technology, people who essentially are able to control. I mean, because I mean, this is, I mean, gaming is typically, or XR is typically the frontier of technology. I mean, literally need to talk at the level of saving CPU cycles and those sort of things. So yeah, I mean, basically, I think that's where basically an ecosystem has to be created up. And I think, yeah, I mean, if done properly, I think basically this can essentially sort of make a lot of sense from a long-term perspective.
Yes, exactly. When you talk about ecosystem, like we actually Ajna Lens has started to create, like already has created a ecosystem in XR as well. So any take or like sorry, I mean anything that Vishwajit or Nidavji you want to add here?
Yeah, I also believe that India is the future, and Indians are, taking on the highest positions in the foreign companies as well. Every foreign company has an Indian CEO or CTO or any high positioning player, and that's good for Indians. And also, if we see that, like Utkarsh ji just said that parents here don't tell their children to play game; they tell them to study. But I think things are changing nowadays. More and more youngsters are getting excited by playing games. They already were into gaming, but as the money is also flowing in gaming, so people are moving and leaning towards gaming as a career as well. And I was there at the IGDC also, so I see a new trend that a group of four developers are making like AAA quality games, and the storyline is good. So I think the future is really good for gaming. We will, going to see a lot of good games developed by a small team. So that's a good sign.
All right. Yes, Nidavji.
Yes. So my take on this is a little bit different. VR is gaming into VR and mixture of this. It's a greater market, but we also see a bigger market than this. So we at Ajna Lens are creating the whole ecosystem, and we initially think that so basically VR and gaming cannot be so productive. We wanted to implement VR into a productive way. Wherein, if I say before 10 years or before 20 years down the line, what was my way of learning and learning or teaching anything, basically? So I had a paper book and all that. The same tradition is going on around right now. So we do not have any innovation or anything right in this. So we at Ajna Lens are here with the vision. We wanted to turn around the learning and development behavior. So this is a bigger market than game, because we see a potential in this. If you want to learn cricket and you need a pitch, you need a ball, a lot of resources are required, a lot of human efforts are required. And what if I say, if you want to learn cricket, you can just wear the VR headsets and you can learn all the analytics and how you are playing, what you should do, what you should not do, the guidance are provided. So it would be the muscle memory would be basically. So in some of the scenarios, well, basically, if we in the science labs, basically the chemistries and all that physics, what we have seen, what we have studied, basically, if we could experience that by wearing VR and doing it, no physical or resources have been used will be used, and the muscle memory will be built in a so better way that we'll never forget any kind of stuff. And if you are doing anything wrong, it would directly pinpoint you that this angle needs to be changed, or the chemical which you are mixing can be harmful for you. In many of the cases wherein, if I'll say fire safety training, basically, so these trainings are very costly, and it's a very time taking, and a lot of resources have been involved in this. And if I'll experience, will learn this with the VR, it will be a lot more better experience, and we would be experiencing it in so better way, and this would build a muscle memory best. So, and India in that state, before 5 years or 10 years, sorry, before 10 years, I've never thought of that India would develop our own XR headset. So we at Ajna Lens have developed our own XR headset wherein it is so immersive, and it's a make in India product. So as the Utkarsh and Vishwajit have mentioned, all the tech companies, or all the big giants, or all the foreign companies have Indians at the top. But why they are going out? If they can be in India, they can start a company, they can take India on another level. Why they are driving to other countries and taking contributing there? Why they are not contributing here? Because the bigger giants see a market in India, but we Indians are going there and being working there. So I think, so it's a bigger market. We should develop here, we should stay here, and we should contribute over here. It's some other land, and it should be always like.
Yeah, I
Exactly.
guess that's because we Indians have a mindset of working rather than creating our own. But I think it's changing now. More and more startups and companies are being formed in India.
Yes, right.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
actually changing. When we say like, we have seen since last many years that people used to get graduated, or they used to complete their studies in US, and then they used to settle there, get a job, and they used to call their family and XYZ. They used to look their future outside India. But nowadays, what's happening is,
Mm.
rather than if they are going for the studies to the US or UK, anywhere, they are coming back and they are starting their own firm here itself. We can say a startup or something like that. So we have seen this happening recently, by a lot of people. So that's fantastic. We are growing in that terms, and it's always awesome. The last question for everyone, it's a common question for everyone. What is the one key change or innovation you hope to see facilitated by XR SDKs?
Yeah. So basically, the key pain point, as I previously mentioned, the main pain point over here, it's like if you have experience and you want to run it on the different headsets, you have to altogether integrate SDKs. If I want to run a cricket experience for on Oculus, so I have an experience, I have to use MetaQuest SDK. If I have to run it on Ajna XR, I have to use Ajna XR SDK. So it takes, at the current state, it takes a lot of time to integrate the SDK into an existing project, replacing the SDK. It's a very time-taking process. And the key change that I always want to see is like AI in this. And if I import the SDK, and what if like if just on a click of button or just by typing it, I can simply implement the SDK, implement the input field as a hand tracking, implement cricket as a object recognition, implement change this whole environment. And so it would create, it would drive it in another way. So creating an experience would be more quicker and in a better. So the whole pain point over here in the VR industry is only creating an experience that should be well optimized, and it should be in a quicker way, and it should be like cross platform friendly, basically. If not cross platform friendly, AI can jump into it and it can create and help in it. So, and also creating an custom game engine, because Unity and Unreal are very limited in VR. So, it also has many limitations. So, AI can help with this, basically.
Yeah, I think, see, I mean, I agree with Nirav on that. See, my take is very simple. I mean, basically, what I see, and then I've seen that basically I mean, we have been into AI for pretty long. So basically, I mean, the future is typically that text to video game or a text to experience sort of a thing. I mean, you essentially just prompt it up and then basically it will automatically generate a lot of stuff. Because the moment that happens up, your entire UGC sort of the user generated content sort of explodes. I mean, so if you look at I mean, if you look at YouTube basically, so YouTube, the moment basically YouTube basically has exploded the moment you essentially had cameras on your phones. Basically, you essentially have a very easier way to essentially just with a single click record and upload it up. Similarly, I think basically this entire domain basically will essentially have the burst of user generated content, because today basically creating up even a simple experience essentially involves a lot of manual labor, manual effort. A lot of things have already been sort of basically automated up or on the way to automate. So for example, today you can generate 3D models from text. Today you can essentially do a lot of I mean, we essentially are also even building up a platform wherein basically you can sort of generate the entire worlds from text, or you can essentially entire rules and logics and everything basically from text. So yeah, I mean, basically I think that is one area that we are looking at. I think basically mentioned, I think basically that is the need of the hour. I mean, Unreal, Unity are legacy systems. I mean, basically, I mean, they are great. I mean, no doubt on that, but they are very, very heavy and very, very legacy systems. I mean, basically, it's like basically you having sort of a Photoshop basically, which has n number of I mean features, but still a lot of people prefer something like a Canva basically, which has limited set of functionalities, but it gets the job done. I think basically that is something which is a sort of an area within India where, because you do not need a lot of systems and legacy knobs and dials for which somebody to essentially get started up with, basically has to do up a 6 months or a year of training just to get started up with the system. So I think those are the two areas which I think basically will sort of go hand in hand. I think basically and I think that's where the explosion of user generated content essentially will essentially happen.
All right. Vishwajit, do
Yeah,
you
so
have anything? Yeah.
yeah, I agree with Nirav and Utkarsh, but I think we should have a unified SDK basically from which we can, build experiences for any headset, just like we have the XR interaction SDK, but it's very difficult to configure it as of now for different headsets. So yeah, I think that would be great. And AI is obviously a, game changing thing for any software or anything, so that we can have the generative AI and we can just put in a prompt and get the task done. So yeah, that's the main, innovation or key change that we would like to have in the SDKs.
All right. Perfect. So, to all the attendees, do you have any questions you can you want to ask the experts? You can mention it in the webinar chat, and we will take it from there. Okay. Apart from this, today we had a poll discussion in our community group, and the question was, what challenges have you faced when working with XR SDKs? So many of the people had these challenges of performance concern. Can anyone tell, any one answer will do, no problem, like how they would overcome this challenge?
See, I think gaming in general basically has this. I mean, not just gaming, also basically in general, also basically. I mean, if you look at Android development, basically, I mean, the higher you go on the level of abstraction, the lower you control you have over the performance and the features, basically. So, I mean, I think somebody was mentioning basically, if you're using Flutter or let's say React Native, you can create. I mean, basically, you're at a very high level of abstraction. Basically, you can then basically your cross-platform experience sort of basically widens up. I mean, you can create from Flutter and publish it even as a web app, basically. But then basically you lose a lot of control or the fine-grained controls within that. uh, the lower you move within that, so for example, you start using Android Studio to essentially create Android apps, you essentially have a lot of control over it. But yeah, I think basically having said that, there are still some things basically that people can sort of do, which sort of exposes up. And I think basically this also was sort of somebody who essentially was mentioning that I mean, you can have SDKs which can cater to newbies which essentially are we don't want to create something very simple, but also basically which expose up a lot of individual sort of functionalities so that people can sort of do that performance optimization. I mean, if somebody knows what they are doing, they can do that. So I think that is one area which essentially sort of comes in.
All right. So the next challenges they faced when working with XR SDKs was platform compatibility. How can they overcome this challenge? Nirav
Yeah,
ji
so
or
for that,
Vishwajit, anyone would like to answer?
So basically, compatibility, as we all have faced and we all heard about that. So XR using an XR SDK, but if we use XR SDK into our experiences, that would help us to run the same experience on each and every of the headsets. But it also has some limitations with it. It doesn't. It do not have so advanced features, and it needs a lot more calibration for each and every of the headsets as well. So if I'm developing hand tracking feature for my headsets, basically Ajna XR Pro, basically that headset, that feature cannot be compatible with Oculus Quest, because Oculus Quest, the sensors, the hand tracking cameras, the RGB camera, all the sensor, the positions and all that have on a different level. All the integrations have been on a different level. So by using XR SDK, it's a way, but it's not the best way because it doesn't enable the advanced usability of the advanced features.
All right. So the another challenges they faced was for documentation. So
yeah,
anyone
So
can,
so
yeah.
I think documentation for the older SDKs won't be a problem, because when they create some SDKs, so they definitely take care of the documentation, because documentation is the only way through which a developer can easily integrate their SDK into their program. So yeah, I mean, it's very necessary for the developers or the SDK creators to update the documentation through time, so that they can add some new features that, or the changes that they have done into the SDK, and the developer can get the changes in real time, and update their app accordingly. So yeah, I
Okay,
mean, that's good for the SDK creators. They have to update their documentation.
that's right. So another last challenge that they faced was for regarding integration issues. Can
See,
anyone like, yeah.
the integration, I think basically the moment you essentially have not just documents, you essentially have examples, you have the proper exposed APIs. I think basically integration is should not be ideally a challenge basically, because and again basically that's where a lot of community and community efforts sort of come in, and also basically a lot of cross device or cross platform testing also sort of comes in. Because for example, I mean basically if you're creating up a tool and you're essentially using up uh, an SDK on top of, I mean below it basically, or if you're essentially creating up a tool on top of it, and you essentially I mean basically again you can have single layer of SDK, or you can have a meta SDK basically, which essentially encompasses different SDKs at the lower level. So yeah, I mean basically at the level of integration basically, if you have a proper documentation, if you have a system basically which is there, even today basically a lot of AI and a lot of that stuff basically, especially in a coding perspective basically, they essentially sort of help up in terms of the integration. And also basically I mean, at the lower level, basically, you have these devices basically. So that is also one thing basically, which I think basically now a lot of manufacturers are sort of sensitive to that they essentially sort of keep most of the functionalities sort of integrated up to the standards. So for example, I mean, if you look at the very early days of graphics cards, basically, so early days of graphics cards, basically, they used to have graphics cards, and those graphics cards typically used to run altogether different structure and different instruction sets. Now, then basically a lot of these OpenGL and DirectX sort of came in. I mean, basically, but now today, basically, if you look at it, I mean, almost all of the graphic cards support OpenGL, DirectX. So obviously, I mean, basically, new patterns do come in. So today you have Vulkan also, basically, a lot of those things. But yeah, I mean, basically, so I think basically it's just a mix of all of these things, basically.
All right. So we have one question by the attendees, like how do you see OpenXR help in XR dev? Will it help fill XR SDK fragmentation issues?
See, OpenXR is created for that purpose, basically, to help with the XR fragmentation.
All right.
Mm.
Anyone would like to add on?
Yeah, I believe OpenXR is to XR dev what Flutter is to mobile phone dev. So OpenXR allows you to build applications that all the XR headset at the same time, but also it limits you with the capabilities of hand tracking and some controller inputs that cannot be used while using XR interaction toolkit or the OpenXR.
All right. Fine. That's all. I think I have no more questions from the attendees and also from my side. I am done with the questions. It was really great having Utkarsh ji, Vishwajit ji, and Neerav ji on our platform for panel discussion. Uh, we will end this session here. It was great talking to you all. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for attending and giving your crucial time. Thank you so much and namaskaram.